The Time Crisis games have always been a favorite of mine, and I've always wondered how those games would translate into VR. Sure, we've had plenty of wave shooters and rail shooters, but none have given us the big budget presentation and over-the-top arcade action of a Namco classic. Well, all of that changed this week with the release of Crossfire Sierra Squad, a game that delivers on the high-octane action you'd want from a Time Crisis VR, but also manages to bring a ton of depth along with it. So what's with all this Time Crisis talk? I mean, Time Crisis is an on-rails light gun shooter, and Crossfire Sierra Squad's VR first-person shooter. Well, shockingly, Crossfire feels like a Time Crisis game, but with complete freedom to move around the battlefield. You move from point to point, occasionally with electric guitars blaring in your ears. Taking down a ton of enemies, and fairly constant radio chatter to make you feel like you're actually part of some bigger operation. You've got 3 grenades on one arm and a health injector on the other, all of which regenerate on a cooldown timer, and the manual reloads are super arcadey too. Grabbing a magazine from your belt and moving it toward the gun initiates a quick reload animation, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the perfect compromise for a game like this. The haptics and adaptive triggers give each weapon a different feel, with the clear standout being the sniper rifle, where gently pressing R2 steadies your aim and puts you into precision mode.
Blacklist combat. Hex-Sex DK-101.
There are 15 single-player campaign missions here, and despite the fact that there is an overarching story, you'll be sent back to the main menu between each mission, which kind of makes the whole game feel like a collection of missions rather than a cohesive story. A simple option to just move on to the next mission instead of going back to the menu would have alleviated this feeling. Regardless, the campaign should take just under 3 hours to complete, well, on normal plus difficulty anyway. There's also easy and normal for beginners, and hard in the hilariously named Debs Couldn't Clear for a real challenge. And after you beat the campaign, you'll unlock Realism Mode. Turning it on removes most of your HUD, so no more grenade indicators, life bars, etc. But most importantly, it gives you and the enemies more realistic HP, which means that if you hate bullet sponge enemies, well, that's a thing of the past. But since you can die just as easily, you'll need to play slower and more methodically. So playing the campaign or any of the co-op missions again with realism mode turned on is obviously an entirely different experience, and it changes the game for the better, I think. The game doesn't end once you finish the campaign though, because there are still over 50 co-op squad missions to complete, which repurpose some of the game's environments but also introduce quite a few new ones. You can play this mode alone or in 2-player co-op by starting a private room or searching for random players online. And this really is where you'll be spending most of your time in Sierra Squad. Each mission takes anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to complete, and the faster you complete them, the better score you'll get. But it's actually so much more than that, because as you knock out each mission, you'll be gaining XP and currency to buy weapons and attachments. And completing each page of missions allows you to further upgrade your weapons and assign newly unlocked perks to them. And unlike the campaign, you can actually decide which 2 weapons you want to take into battle with you. The missions can absolutely feel like a wave shooter, and yeah, getting through all the squad missions is a total grind, but it's ridiculously fun and there's a ton of polish here, so personally I didn't mind at all. Playing with a friend and calling out which drones, snipers, and bosses you're taking down, and racing toward the end of the mission for the best score is how I spent the better part of the last few days, and I certainly crafted a few ridiculous weapons along the way. If that wasn't enough, there's also a Horde mode for up to 4 players. There's only 1 map right now with 2 more on the way, and surprisingly jumping in with the whole without parole crew felt great as we defended our base from wave after wave of increasingly dangerous enemies. Now normally a mode like this wouldn't interest me too much, but there's an online leaderboard here that I'm sure will keep us coming back as we try to keep our names on the top of the list. If all this sounds great so far, well, I have to agree, it kind of is. The graphics and environments are all running at a high resolution and sport tons of detail. Seriously, some of these stages are stunning. Even the lobby has a ton of activity going on, with soldiers at work, patrolling the base, helicopters flying overhead, and a massive shooting range to test your weapons on. I do have to say that some of the levels feel tiny, especially at first, and the game throws up invisible walls in the worst possible places. When you're being attacked from all sides and you go to take cover in what should be part of the level, The screen turns black and white and stops you from moving. And if you don't already know where you can and can't go, this will cause a few unnecessary deaths while you play. Hopefully this can all be fixed, because some of the areas that are blocked off make no sense at all. As much as Crossfire feels like an off-the-rails time crisis, it doesn't go quite far enough with the over-the-top action. It's great firing RPGs and blowing up tanks and helicopters flying above your head and having walls explode all around you, but I would have killed to have missions that take place inside a vehicle, like shooting from a helicopter or from the passenger seat of a Jeep. Even the first Crisis Brigade had levels like this. We also encountered just a few minor bugs during our playthrough. The in-game voice chat for 2 players worked great, but for 4 it cut out completely and we had to switch to party chat. And loading into a co-op level caused the game to freeze once or twice, but considering how infrequently it happened during the hours and hours we sunk into this, it's barely worth a mention. Oh, and currently Sierra Squad isn't cross-play with PSVR, but that update should be coming soon after launch.
Watch out for unknowns.
Crossfire Sierra Squad isn't for everyone. It's essentially a good version of Bravo Team or a bigger budget Crisis Brigade. But I do think the appeal widens the more you play. What initially feels like a casual arcade shooter starts to get its hooks in you, and grinding through the co-op levels and upgrading your weapons is immensely satisfying. It's the kind of thing you don't want to stop doing until you've purchased everything in the shop and maxed out the stats of all your favorite weapons. Plus, with all the difficulty levels and the unlockable realism mode, there's a ton of replayability here. Crossfire Sierra Squad's an absolute bargain at the $30 launch price, and I'm loving my time with it.
Watch out for long shots. RPG!